The cold marble of Rome's halls was supposed to offer safety, but safety is just a word when the earth outside trembles. It was not the tremor of a distant earthquake that chilled the blood of the Roman soldier. It was the sound of a million hooves, a rhythm of death approaching from the eastern dark. They said his horse left no grass behind it, and his name was a curse whispered by mothers to quiet crying children. His face was ordinary, yet the fear he commanded was a force of nature. He did not need a crown of gold or a polished breastplate to rule. His empire was built on a simple, raw-feeling terror. This is the story of Attila, the man who had no need for keys, because fear alone opened every gate for him. He was not just a warrior, he was a psychological weapon, and in the shadow of his coming, the great, eternal city of Rome learned a new kind of silence. A silence that screams. Make sure to watch the video all the way till the end. I promise you're going to find it super informative. We put a lot of hard work into bringing you this content, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and share it with your friends. Your support helps the channel grow and motivates us to keep creating even better videos for you. The year was dark, stained by news that galloped faster than any messenger. In the Roman camps along the vast river Danube, the nights were long, and the men did not speak much. Every whisper seemed to carry the echo of the name they were forbidden to say out loud. Attila. Imagine a Roman soldier, Aeneas, standing guard. He was a strong man, hardened by years of service, but tonight, his hands shook not from the winter cold, but from a deeper, colder fear. He had faced the Goths and the Vandals. He knew how to fight men. But the Huns were not just men. They were a storm of mounted death, and Attila was the eye of that storm. The rumors were the worst part. They spoke of Huns who lived on their horses, who ate raw meat warmed under their saddles. They said their arrows flew faster than a frightened deer, and that a Hunnic arrow would always find its mark. These stories were not just about their fighting skill. They were stories designed to break a man's spirit before the battle even began. The Huns didn't just win wars. They made their enemies lose the will to fight. Aeneas remembered an officer, a proud, loud man named Marcus. Marcus had laughed at the stories a month ago. "Barbarians," he had roared. But then Marcus saw the results of a Hunnic raid on a nearby village. Not the dead bodies, but the way the survivors looked. Empty, frozen. Marcus didn't laugh anymore. He stopped talking completely. His fear was so heavy it felt like a stone in the air. This was Attila's power, a poison that spread through the mind. The video's goal is to show the Roman soldiers' fear. Attila had not even crossed the main border yet, but his presence was everywhere. It was in the sudden disappearance of scouts. It was in the unnatural quiet of the forests. It was in the way the local people packed their few belongings and vanished without a word, like birds sensing a predator. To the Romans, Attila was not a king, but a force of destruction, a natural disaster given a human form. They called him the Flagellum Dei, which means the Scourge of God. Think about that name. It means they believed Attila was not fighting for land or gold, but was sent by the heavens themselves to punish them. How do you fight a punishment from God? You can't. You can only pray and wait. This idea that Attila was more than a man was exactly what Attila wanted. His reputation was his greatest weapon, cheaper and more effective than a million soldiers. When a Roman army heard the distant sound of Hunnic drums, half the battle was already won for Attila, because every Roman heart was already filled with dread. The power of a story, a terrible reputation, can be stronger than a sword. And Attila's story was the scariest tale ever told in the Roman world. The mighty Roman Empire, which had conquered most of the known world, was now terrified by the sound of nothing, the silence that came just before the scream. Attila's terrifying reputation promised a monster, a giant, bloodthirsty brute with flaming eyes. The Roman generals and emperors who finally dared to meet him expected to see a devil straight out of their worst nightmares. What they saw was something much, much more unsettling. A man who looked ordinary. Historical accounts, often written by terrified Roman ambassadors, give us a strange picture of Attila. He was not towering or muscular like the legendary heroes of old. He was described as having a large head, small, deep-set eyes, a flat nose, and a sparse beard. He was dark and quick-moving. He was physically nothing special. This ordinariness was the key to his extraordinary power. Imagine a powerful Roman official, perhaps a senator named Valentinian, being brought before Attila for the first time. Valentinian is dressed in expensive purple robes, surrounded by guards, expecting to impress the barbarian king. He walks into Attila's main tent, which is surprisingly simple, made of wood and not marble or gold. He sees Attila sitting on a plain wooden chair, eating meat off a simple wooden plate. Attila did not wear gold. He did not boast. While his chiefs wore jewels and drank from silver cups, Attila used simple clay and wood. This self-control was his first weapon. It showed the Romans that he did not care about their wealth, their symbols of power, or their luxuries. He cared only about real power, the power to command, the power to destroy. But the most important part was his psychological presence. Attila didn't need to shout to be heard. He didn't need to threaten with a loud voice. Historians talk about his eyes. Those small, deep-set eyes were like black holes that seemed to suck the confidence right out of anyone who looked into them. He would often just look at a Roman official, completely silent, and the official would begin to sweat, tremble, and lose his power to speak. This was Attila's genius, intimidation as an art form. He knew that the biggest difference between Rome and the Huns was not in their armies, but in their minds. The Romans were spoiled, used to comfort, and deeply worried about losing their status. Attila, who lived simply, had nothing to lose, and this made him seem unbreakable. When Valentinian met Attila, he saw a man who was utterly comfortable with himself and utterly capable of violence. Attila used silence and simple looks to make the most powerful men in the world feel like small children being scolded. They felt like he could see their deepest fears and weaknesses. They would quickly agree to whatever he asked, just to get away from his presence. His body was unremarkable, but his will was a mountain. He was a master of control, not by force alone, but by a chilling, unsettling charisma. Attila was the living proof that true power comes not from the clothes you wear or the size of your army, but from the level of fear you can instill in the hearts of others. He was an ordinary man who made the greatest empire in the world feel utterly powerless. The Roman army had rules, formations, and heavy, slow-moving legions. They fought wars like a slow, crushing machine. The Huns, under Attila, fought like a sudden, violent change in the weather. They were a whirlwind of horsemen, and their entire culture was built for speed, mobility, and shock. To understand the fear Attila commanded, you must understand the Hun. He lived on his horse. From the time they were children, the Huns learned to ride before they truly learned to walk. Their horses were their home, their transport, and their weapon platform. They could eat, sleep, and even hold council meetings without ever touching the ground. This meant they could travel incredible distances faster than any army Rome could field. They could appear out of nowhere and vanish just as quickly, leaving nothing but ruin behind. The greatest weapon of the Huns was the composite recurve bow. This was not a simple wooden arch. It was a complex weapon, made of layers of wood, horn, and sinew, glued together to create immense power. The shape of the bow allowed a Hunnic rider to turn completely backward on his horse, a move called the Parthian shot. and fire an arrow with enough force to pierce Roman armor. They could rain down a storm of deadly arrows from a distance before the Roman soldiers could even get close enough to use their short swords. Think of a battle from the Roman perspective. They would form their solid lines, ready to meet an enemy face to face. But the Huns wouldn't meet them. They would circle, a mass of riders moving too fast to hit, firing thousands of arrows. If the Romans charged, the Huns would scatter like dust, only to reappear on the flanks, shooting, yelling, and causing chaos. They didn't fight to hold ground. They fought to break the enemy's formation and, more importantly, to break their will. Attila understood the power of the unexpected. His raids were quick, brutal, and aimed at the soft underbelly of the Roman world, the wealthy, unprotected cities and farms. By making every Roman citizen feel that no place was safe, Attila made the Roman government look weak and incapable. Furthermore, the Hunnic armies were massive and constantly growing. Attila didn't just command Huns. He commanded a vast mix of defeated groups, Ostrogoths, Gepids, and others, who were terrified of him but loyal because he offered them the chance to raid the rich Roman lands. Attila was a master at bringing together different, often hostile, groups under one banner. His psychological power extended not just to his enemies, but to his own massive multinational army. They followed him because they believed he was destined for victory, and to doubt him was to invite immediate, cruel punishment. The Huns were the perfect opposite of Rome. Rome was heavy, organized, and tied to its cities. The Huns were light, fluid, and tied to their horses. This difference meant that the rules of war that Rome had used for hundreds of years simply did not apply anymore. Attila had changed the game, and the vast Roman Empire was slow to catch up to the terrifying speed of his warfare. For years, the Roman Empire was like a giant old tree, seemingly solid, but with two great, separate branches. The Western Roman Empire, based in cities like Rome and Ravenna, and the Eastern Roman Empire, based in the glittering, wealthy city of Constantinople. When Attila first arrived on the Roman frontier, he looked at both and made a brilliant, calculated decision. He focused his terror on the East. Why the East? Simply put, gold and weakness. The Eastern Roman Empire, sometimes called the Byzantine Empire, was much richer. Constantinople was the hub of trade, receiving goods and taxes from Asia Minor, Egypt, and Greece. It was a massive storehouse of wealth, and its emperors often focused more on complex politics and religion than on keeping up a strong frontier army. The Western Empire, meanwhile, was falling apart. It was already dealing with Goths, Vandals, and political chaos. The West was poor, drained of resources, and harder to conquer because there wasn't a single, enormous prize like Constantinople. Attila was a smart strategist. He saw that he could get more gold with less effort by targeting the East. Attila's campaigns against the Eastern Empire began with terrifying speed. In 441 AD, he launched a massive, coordinated attack. He struck deep into the Balkan provinces, destroying city after city. The Eastern Roman army was scattered and weak, unable to stop the fast-moving Hunnic cavalry. They didn't have the numbers or the speed to counter Attila's tactics. The fear in Constantinople must have been unimaginable. The city, protected by its legendary massive walls, suddenly felt vulnerable. The Emperor Theodosius II was paralyzed by fear. Instead of sending out an army to fight, he sent out ambassadors to beg for peace. Attila didn't even have to besiege Constantinople's walls, which were some of the strongest fortifications in the ancient world. His mere presence and the sheer destruction he had caused across the countryside were enough. He knew that if he could break the economy and the spirit of the East, the emperor would pay anything to make him leave. And pay they did. Attila demanded massive amounts of gold, known as tribute, to stop his attacks. The first payment was large, But the next payment was even larger. Theodosius II agreed to pay 700 pounds of gold every year, but Attila constantly found new excuses to demand more. He wasn't just taking money. He was establishing a relationship where the mighty Roman Empire was forced to pay taxes to a barbarian king. This pivot to the east was a masterpiece of strategic warfare. Attila used the massive wealth of the Eastern Empire as his own personal bank account. He was essentially siphoning the lifeblood of Rome. He didn't need to conquer the land and rule it. He just needed to make the Romans pay him to not destroy it. This ensured a steady stream of wealth and kept his army supplied without constant, costly battles. The East, despite its riches, was brought to its knees by fear and strategic financial drain. Attila understood that warfare was expensive, and that constant battles wore down even the strongest armies. His real genius was in turning the rich Roman Empire into his silent, automatic supplier. The relationship he forced upon the Eastern Roman Emperor Theodosius II was not one of peace, but one of calculated, continuous extortion. This wasn't just simple robbery. It was a complex game of psychological pressure and diplomatic manipulation. Attila used the tribute system as a weapon far more reliable than his bow and arrow. After the devastating campaigns of 441 to 443 AD, the peace treaty forced upon the East was a masterpiece of humiliation for Rome. It included three main, draining conditions: massive upfront payment, an immediate, crippling payment of thousands of pounds of gold to pay for past destruction. This emptied the Roman treasury and hurt their ability to fund their own armies. Increased annual tax. The yearly payment of gold, the tribute, was multiplied, becoming a constant, heavy drain on the Eastern economy. Return of fugitives. All Huns or people who had fled Attila's rule and sought safety in the Roman Empire had to be returned. If the Romans failed to find them, they had to pay a steep price in gold for every missing person. This created a constant, maddening bureaucratic and financial burden. Attila didn't stop there. He constantly created new reasons to complain. His ambassadors would arrive in Constantinople with minor, almost unbelievable complaints. A misplaced artifact, an insult to a minor chief, a dispute over a narrow strip of land. He used these small matters to demand even more gold, always keeping the Romans off balance. The emperor and his court lived in a state of nervous panic, always fearing that the next diplomatic messenger would be the one to start the war again. Attila's diplomacy was an exercise in terror management. He knew that every time a Roman ambassador came to his court, that ambassador was terrified of him. Attila would use his silent, magnetic gaze, as we discussed in Chapter 2, to make the Roman official feel small, weak, and desperate to agree to any demand. The ambassadors would rush back to Constantinople, urging the emperor to pay up, believing that even one missed payment would mean the total destruction of the empire. The cost to the Eastern Empire was immense. To raise the gold, the emperor had to raise taxes on his already suffering people. He had to melt down valuable church relics and pieces of gold plate. He had to stop funding the armies and border defenses. Attila had found a way to make the Romans pay for the collapse of Rome. Attila had achieved his goal. The Eastern Empire was politically humiliated, economically drained, and psychologically broken. They were no longer a real threat, but a highly profitable source of income. This strategic victory allowed Attila to turn his attention elsewhere, knowing the East would be too crippled to fight back. He had mastered the game of gold and whispers, proving that psychological warfare and financial pressure could be even more destructive than actual blood spilled on the battlefield. Having successfully drained the wealth and spirit of the Eastern Roman Empire, as detailed in Chapter 5, Attila was ready for a new target. His massive empire of Huns and subject tribes was restless, and it needed more wealth and more challenges to keep it together. His attention finally, decisively, turned to the Western Roman Empire. The pivot to the west in 450 AD was triggered by a fascinating, though perhaps untrue, romantic drama involving the Roman princess Honoria, sister of the Western Emperor Valentinian III. Legend says that Honoria, trapped and unhappy in the Roman court, sent her ring to Attila, asking him to rescue her. An act Attila interpreted as a marriage proposal and a claim to half of the Western Empire. Whether true or not, it gave Attila the perfect, high-profile reason to demand a massive prize and launch his final terrible campaign. In 451 AD, Attila crossed the Rhine River and marched into Gaul, modern France, with an army that seemed to stretch to the horizon. City after city fell in brutal, bloody sieges. The terror that had paralyzed the east now swept over the west. However, in the west, Attila finally met his match in a brilliant Roman general named Flavius Aetius. Aetius was an interesting figure. He had spent time among the Huns and understood their methods and Attila's mind better than anyone. He quickly formed an unlikely and desperate alliance with the Visigoths, a powerful Germanic tribe who had previously been enemies of Rome. This alliance led to the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, one of the largest and most important battles in history. It was a massive, bloody clash of civilizations. While the battle itself was incredibly costly and ended without a clear winner, both sides claiming victory, it achieved one vital goal. It stopped Attila's advance into Gaul. Aetius had prevented Attila from achieving a decisive victory that would have destroyed the West completely. It was the first time Attila's momentum was truly broken. But Attila was not defeated. In 452 AD, he recovered quickly and launched a terrifying invasion of Italy itself. He destroyed the great city of Aquileia, leaving nothing but ruins, and his path was marked by widespread panic. He marched toward Rome itself, the ancient heart of the empire. At this moment, something extraordinary happened. Attila stopped. The Roman emperor, paralyzed by fear, sent the most respected figures he had to meet Attila: Pope Leo I, Leo the Great, and two high-ranking senators. What happened at this meeting is one of history's great mysteries. Pope Leo, a small man in white robes, met the Scourge of God face to face. The historians say Pope Leo's words convinced Attila to turn back. But the practical reasons were likely more important. Attila's army was suffering from hunger and sickness, and Aetius' forces were still a threat. Attila, always the strategist, decided to retreat. Within a year of this retreat, in 453 AD, Attila died suddenly on his wedding night. The cause is unknown, perhaps a simple nosebleed that suffocated him, perhaps poisoning. Just as quickly as he had appeared, the great force of nature was gone. Attila's death did not end the fear. His legacy was the psychological collapse of the Roman Empire. He had shown the world, and more importantly, the Romans themselves, just how fragile their great civilization was. He had successfully drained their wealth, broken their spirit, and dismantled their borders. Even after his death, the memory of his terror continued to influence policy and cripple Roman confidence for generations. He was the force that shattered the Roman world, proving that true power is not just in the sword, but in the unstoppable story of fear.